Welcome to the writing section of the A Cup Lacer preparation. We are now transitioning from being a reader who observes text to being an editor who constructs and repairs text. Your first module in this category is a ACC WR 1.1 titled Proposition. On the A Cup Lacer, a proposition is not simply a main idea. In the writing section, a proposition is a rhetorical claim or a controlling statement that dictates the scope and direction of a paragraph or an entire essay. To achieve a top-tier score, you must understand how to identify, evaluate, and revise these propositions within the context of academic prose. The A Cup Lacer writing test will frequently present you with a passage where the sentences are numbered. You will then be asked a question such as, which sentence best expresses the central claim of the second paragraph? Or, the author wants to add a sentence that clearly introduces the main point of the passage. Which of the following would best achieve this goal? To answer these correctly, you must distinguish between three distinct types of statements: the topic, the fact, and the proposition. A topic is a broad subject, such as renewable energy or public education. It is too vague to be a proposition. A fact is a provable piece of data, such as solar panels convert sunlight into electricity. While a fact is true, it is not a proposition because it does not require support or explanation. It simply exists. A proposition, however, is a debatable or explanatory claim that requires evidence to be proven. An example of a proposition would be, despite their high initial cost, solar panels are the most viable long-term energy solution for residential homeowners in the Northeast. This statement is a proposition because it takes a stand, defines a specific scope, residential homeowners in the Northeast, and sets up a clear expectation that the rest of the paragraph will provide evidence regarding viability and cost-effectiveness. In the writing section, your primary task is to ensure the proposition is neither too broad nor too narrow. This is known as the Goldilocks principle of academic writing. If a proposition is too broad, the supporting details that follow will feel disconnected or insufficient. For instance, if a paragraph begins with the proposition, technology has changed modern life, but the rest of the paragraph only discusses smartphone apps for grocery shopping, the proposition is failing. It has promised a discussion on all of modern life, but only delivered a tiny slice. A top score editor would revise that proposition to be more specific. Smartphone applications have specifically revolutionized the way consumers manage their domestic chores, such as grocery shopping. Conversely, if the proposition is too narrow, it leaves the author with nowhere to go. A sentence like, "The local library was built in 1924, is a narrow fact. It cannot serve as a proposition because there is nothing to develop or argue in the subsequent sentences. A major challenge on the A Cup Lacer is the placement of the proposition. While many students are taught that the topic sentence or proposition always comes at the very beginning of a paragraph, the A Cup Lacer loves to deviate from this pattern. You will often encounter a lead-in structure. In this structure, the first sentence of the paragraph provides a transition or a piece of historical context, and the actual proposition does not appear until the second or third sentence. Listen to this example. For decades, the standard treatment for this disease involved a combination of heavy medication and bed rest. However, recent breakthroughs in genetic therapy have rendered these traditional methods obsolete by providing a more targeted approach to healing. In this paragraph, sentence 1 is just background information. Sentence 2 is the actual proposition. If the test asks you to identify the sentence that expresses the main claim, and you reflexively pick sentence 1 because it is at the top, you will lose the point. You must look for the pivot word, such as however, nonetheless, or consequently, which often signals that the author is about to drop the real proposition. When you are asked to revise or add a proposition, you must employ the evidence backmapping technique. This involves ignoring the current proposition for a moment and looking strictly at the supporting details provided in the middle of the paragraph. If the supporting details mention reduced commute times, lower office rent, and increased employee retention, then the proposition you choose must be an umbrella that covers all three of those specific points. If an answer choice only mentions office rent, it is too narrow. If an answer choice mentions the general benefits of the modern economy, it is too broad. The correct proposition must perfectly align with the weight of the evidence provided. The test makers also use fact bars, ed distractors, to lure you into picking a wrong answer. They will give you an answer choice that is factually true according to the passage, but is too minor to be the proposition. For example, if a paragraph discusses the environmental benefits of reforestation, a distractor might be, trees produce oxygen through the process of photosynthesis. While that is a true statement, it is a scientific fact used as evidence. It is not the rhetorical claim the author is making about reforestation policy. You must reject these low-level facts and look for the high-level claim that encompasses the author's purpose. Furthermore, you must be sensitive to the tone and style of the proposition. A proposition for an academic essay on the Accuplacer should be formal, objective, and precise. Avoid propositions that use informal language or overly emotional appeals unless the entire passage is a personal narrative. If a question asks you to improve a proposition, look for the version that removes fluff and replaces vague words like good or thing with precise academic terms like beneficial or phenomenon. Another sophisticated skill being tested in Module ACC WR 1.1 is the relationship between the proposition and the thesis statement of the entire passage. In a multi-paragraph passage, each paragraph's proposition must act as a subproposition that supports the main thesis. If the whole essay argues that standardized testing is an inaccurate measure of student intelligence, then the proposition of paragraph 2 might focus on the role of test anxiety, while the proposition of paragraph 3 might focus on socioeconomic bias in question design. If you are asked to choose a new proposition for paragraph 4, and one of the options is about the history of the pencil, you must reject it immediately because it does not serve the overarching thesis of the essay. Let us discuss the sentence addition questions in detail. These are the most common ways propositions are tested. The prompt will say, the author is considering adding the following sentence to the start of paragraph 3. Should the author make this addition? These are yes-no questions followed by a because statement. To get a top score, do not just look at the yes or no. Focus on the because statement. A correct yes answer will usually say, yes, because it provides a clear transition and introduces the specific focus of the upcoming paragraph. A correct no answer will usually say, no, because it introduces a new idea that is not supported by the rest of the text, or no, because it repeats information that was already established in the introduction. A top-tier strategy for these questions is the cover-up test. Before looking at the provided answer choices, cover them up or ignore them in your mind and read the paragraph without the proposition. Ask yourself, what is the one thing this author is trying to prove here? Formulate that claim in your own words. Only then should you look at the options. This prevents you from being swayed by the sophisticated, but ultimately wrong, wording of the test maker's distractors. You must also be aware of the scope shift. Sometimes, an author will start a paragraph with one proposition, but then drift into a different topic halfway through. The Accuplacer will ask you how to fix this. Often, the solution is not to change the evidence, but to revise the proposition so that it acknowledges both parts of the paragraph. For example, if a paragraph starts by talking about the beauty of the Grand Canyon, but ends by talking about the danger of its hiking trails, the best proposition would be something like, while the Grand Canyon offers unparalleled aesthetic beauty, it also presents significant physical risks to unprepared visitors. This, while X, Y structure, is a very common correct answer format for complex propositions on the Accuplacer because it successfully captures a two-part paragraph. As you move through your mail route, think of each street as a paragraph. The street sign is the topic, which is just a name. The proposition is like a delivery instruction that tells you exactly what kind of mail goes there and how to handle it. Every house on that street must match that instruction. If you see a house that doesn't belong, the instruction, the proposition, needs to be changed to include it, or the house, the irrelevant detail, needs to be removed. In summary, for Module ACC.WR.1.1. First, a proposition is a debatable claim, not a broad topic or a narrow fact. Second, it must be Goldilocks-sized, not too broad for the evidence provided and not too narrow to prevent development. Third, pay close attention to placement. Look for pivot words like however that signal the real proposition might not be the first sentence. Fourth, use backmapping to ensure the proposition covers all the supporting details in the paragraph. Fifth, in yes-no addition questions, prioritize the logic of the because statement over the yes or no itself. Sixth, use the while x, why structure to handle paragraphs that cover two related but distinct points. Seventh, ensure the proposition aligns with the formal, academic tone of the entire passage. By mastering the art of the proposition, you are mastering the backbone of the writing test. If the proposition is weak, the entire paragraph collapses. If the proposition is strong, the logic of the writing becomes undeniable. This skill is exactly what will allow you to skip remedial writing and enter directly into college-level composition at Hudson Valley. That concludes our deep dive into ACC.WR.1.1. You are building a powerful editorial mind while you work. When you are ready to explore how to back up these propositions with solid evidence, our next target is Module ACC.WR.1.2 support. Just say the word, next, when you are ready to proceed.